Hi, I'm Rosie Richmond.
And I'm Peg Nofel.
Welcome to Works in Progress, a show where writers read and viewers listen.
Coming to Works in Progress tonight by special dispensation is Q Synopsis, Champaign-Urbana's most obscure writer.
You've seen Q on our show before, maybe twice on Access 4, and you're in for a treat again. Here he is, the obscure Q.
Katie, I've been talking to you for the past 3 hours, and I don't think you're really paying attention. You're 4 inches tall and sit at a small desk atop my computer, gazing out the rectangle of sky high up in the concrete wall. Your unfinished notes from the last meeting of the Committee on Committee Meetings are scattered across the top of your tiny desk, and your tiny cup of coffee is getting cold much faster than my larger cup is. If I try to pick you up and hold you to the window, will you gaze at the birds as they hop around, pecking at the twine I have left out for their nests, and admire their delicate aerodynamic properties, or will you lick your lips? Like Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, a cat I once had. The way you are daydreaming reminds me of the time you took me water skiing at the top of Niagara Falls. Neither of us had considered that the current might surpass the speed of the boat, and for a while I was quite nervous. Skinny, knock-kneed, clutching the bar as you gunned the throttle against a geyser of foam, and we moved slowly backwards with the rushing flood of water destined for gravity. Finally, we began to move forwards inch by inch, and then you turned from behind the controls of the boat to take a hologram of me in which the terror was clearly etched into my face. Later, over a dinner of live crab, you're telling me about post-structuralism, and I couldn't really follow how the transmogrified elementalism of post-psychic awareness had superseded a tendency on the part of all advertising companies to underestimate their audience's intelligence by an average of 50 IQ points. I think the wine is getting to me. I had wine, right? That was the time we were at the virtual restaurant, and I had a Silicon Valley 1993 virtual white. And as I raised the glass of tepid water and saluted you, you could not see my eyes behind the bulky goggles with trailing cables and the electrodes wired to my scent glands, all of which created a low-resolution but convincing simulation of inexpensive white wine and a simulated wine steward who appeared to stand by the table side, appearing to wait, to appear to refill my glass at random intervals during the entire conversation we had, which I don't remember because I couldn't hear you because of the stereo headphones with electronically generated clinking of distant knives and forks and randomly generated conversations from simulated adjacent tables. Also, when I looked at you, the goggles showed me a yellow smiley face hanging disembodied across the table from me. Were you even still there? I struggled to get the helmet off. Was I even in a restaurant? I beckoned to the wine steward who bowed and disappeared in a flash of static. Katie, where were you? Were you trapped inside the salt shaker watching me through the holes? Were you inside the pepper mill, hoping nobody would pick it up, your eyes and lips burning like the fire that had started between us at the midpoint, between Urbana, Illinois, and Sarasota, Florida, on the border between Alabama and Georgia, directly west of Atlanta? Atlanta is already burning. I hope the fire hadn't started in the trailer home where you studied composition with Ligeti for 13 years, and he explained how the technique by which he composed articulations was different from Burroughs' cut-up technique. You got really frustrated and drove your motorcycle through the desert that night as a wake of coyotes ran alongside, their long tongues flapping behind them like the unfurling paper noisemakers at your 13th birthday party, to which I, incidentally, was not invited. Well, I did get you a present. Well, I made you a present. It was a working ornithopter 100 meters long, and together we sailed in it through the misty Surus lit crimson by the sun setting over the Adriatic, both of us pedaling furiously, gasping and wheezing. Would we land in the water or pedal on towards the sun rising over Siberia? Over Siberia? We must have gone off course at some point, maybe when, while you pedaled doubly hard, I walked out to the tip of one of the 8 wings to smoke a cigarette. Which was not easy. as the wing was flapping twice a second from your efforts. At the moment the horizon tipped, and all I could think about as I fell through the night towards an unknown impact point, the lights of scattered Slavic villages like rapidly expanding constellations, was the time we met. We were in the same beer cooler at the corner liquor store. You were the barmaid on the St. Pauli Girl label. I was the distinguished aristocrat on the Sam Adams label. Although I, shy but distinguished, avoided your glare and secretly wished I was the Satan on the old Nick label, you exclaimed, "Look at this! The man on the label gets to wear a double-breasted suit and pose before a vast library of leather-bound volumes and is credited with the authorship of the Declaration of Independence, while the woman on the label gets to carry 5 foaming mugs at once while simultaneously avoiding being pinched by overweight 19th century Germans with smithing teeth and smiling, and is referred to as the St. Pauli Girl. And I don't even want to talk about the lazy Mexican on the Kahlua bottle as compared to the pristine British man on the Beefeater bottle. Which ethnic stereotype makes a smoother Black Russian? I could not speak. I was printed in 3 colors. But I think you sensed at that moment that I was not brewed according to Germany's Purity Act of 1516. And for the time being, that was enough to distinguish me from the monk on the Franziskaner Hefeweißbier label, and you from the woman in the light poster. That night, we were bought by the same customer and ended up in the same paper bag. Later, in the same refrigerator. I could not speak, but hoped that the woman who bought us would drink me first, as I could not bear the thought of being left alone in the dark refrigerator with the partially consumed roast. That way, perhaps you would get to witness my opening. I was badly shaken, and I knew it would be glorious. My head would erupt much the way it did this afternoon when I came home from class and the coffee was so intense that both my eyes were in the same socket. Rick had to hose my creativity off the ceiling. Then he called your service up and your beeper went off while you were stalking a panther in the underbrush. The panther dropped its briefcase and whirled around, startled. You emerged from the underbrush apologetically and asked shyly if the panther was an endangered species. Relieved, the panther picked up its briefcase, which had come unlatched, and you helped it collect its anthropology notes before they all blew away across the tall grass. The panther offered you an opportunity to live in its village, and in the passenger seat of its Land Rover, you thundered across the savannah, frightening herds of fleet elk which moved from your path as you held your straw hat down, hair whipping across your mouth. I never found out what happened, but I got your postcard. It was handed to me by a mugger who had snuck up behind me on the streets of Manhattan while I was in line to get my weekly pair of tickets for Cats. I always saved you a seat, even then. The mugger took my wallet, put about 5 crisp V-spots in it, slid a couple of credit cards in his name, and bus tokens. Then he gave me my wallet back and told me to put it in my pocket because he had a knife and might cut himself if I didn't do what he said. Then he said, "Oh, Katie wanted me to give you this," and gave me the postcard, along with the new CD player still in its unopened box. I figured you had put this mugger up to it, and, indignant, I did not go to see Cats that week. And somehow I ended up in Illinois with my own theater group, and I really wanted us to perform Herbert Brune's version of Cats, Ketzen, for you. But your tiny desk was empty save for a few tiny poems stuck under the grain of corn you use as a paperweight. Where had you gone? I looked for my gerbil Jean Lenecre, but found only a partially eaten note he had left. I tried to read your poems, but the thin paper melted to my fingertip at the slightest touch, and the ink blurred microscopic and illegible. It would have been much different if I had been a Lego person and merely posed smiling against riveted backdrops, plastic vehicles and the maintenance thereof, waving from behind the immobile handlebars of 3-wheeled motorcycles, operating painted computer dials on rockets fused solid with plastic, and those evenly distributed rivets on all horizontal surfaces. What are those? They're all over everything. What do you mean, that's how I stuck you together? What are you talking about? Hey, why are you taking off that guy's hair? You don't take off hair to put a hat on, silly. Oh my God, he's got one of those rivets on his head. I do not. I have a space helmet. Don't touch it, I'll depressurize. You were hundreds of times my size, but were very gentle. You held me high in the air in your cushioned palm and showed me how Legoland ended after about a foot from where I was first assembled. I used to be a cowboy, you said, until you had taken the cowboy hat off and then put the space helmet on, at which time I had assumed a new personality, even though my head, a yellow plastic smiley face, had always been mine. It was true. The sticker on the front of my blue thorax, above the seam where my own rivets divided my body into segments, was a crude Western shirt simulacrum. It was not a spacesuit. My hands were yellow, not blue. I had no gloves. Why didn't I depressurize? Was your atmosphere breathable, Katie? There was so much I did not understand. You set me on the windowsill and showed me all the other Lego people, many of whose segments I had once worn with my head. You asked me how many men and how many women there were. I answered, 2 women and 16 men. You asked me to count the people again. There were 2 with pigtails, 1 with a blowaway, 5 with messenger hats, 4 with medieval helmets, 2 with hard hats, 1 with a cowboy hat, and 1 with a chef's hat, and me with my space helmet. 2 women and 17 men. You frowned. I wondered what I had said wrong. You removed the pigtails from one of the women and a hard hat from one of the men and replaced them on the opposite heads. Now the woman is a man, I exclaimed. You corrected me, explaining that the head was still the same. I don't understand. They are all women, you explained, including you. This confused me a lot, and just to reassure me, you put me behind the immobile handlebars of the biggest van, where I smiled at you from behind the biggest plastic windshield, knowing that I would never, ever roll anywhere unless, of course, you pushed me. But you had resumed typing by then and were staring studiously at your unfinished screenplay for the upcoming blockbuster multi-trillion cinematic feature film, soon to be a videotape, whose release date will correspond precisely to the date the film opens in theaters, its first showing simultaneous with its television premiere on every network, broadcast and cable access, and its FM stereo simulcast and Broadway opening. This was the plan, anyway. I didn't want to disappoint you, but didn't think very many people would rent the videotape. You waved me away, busily typing the climactic scene in which you, played by you, acting as your own stunt person, drive your Trans Am convertible from the tip to the tail of a jet engaged in supersonic flight, hit the tail like a ramp, and just as the jet explodes, shot with a brilliant missile from the jet chasing it, the Trans Am hurtles, seemingly forwards, actually backwards at 1.5 times the speed of sound, across a brilliant blue matte sky. And you don your sunglasses and somersault from the car just as it collides with the jet, which had been pursuing you in a spectacular effect by industrial light and magic. You light a cigarette with your last match, which you will have to go back and establish by writing the second to last match into the plot at some earlier point. As you tumble through the sky at the speed of sound, your parachute opens, and smoking calmly, you are surrounded by machine gun-wielding helicopters who order you to surrender as black-robed martial arts experts leap from the helicopter onto your parachute and shimmy down the strings towards you, triple-bladed knives in their teeth. You phone your producer to make sure that the musician you hire to write the soundtrack plagiarizes from female composers in significant proportion. And you call for more coffee, but I've fallen asleep on the couch with the television set on, and, to my oblivion, Bill Clinton had, in the middle of the speech I fell asleep during, looked directly into the camera and, seeing that I had fallen asleep, gestured to the assembled audience of journalists, bodyguards, and bartenders to be quiet, and climbed directly into the camera and out through my television screen into my living room, where he looked around and saw at the honest, average, tax-paying, hard-working, Democratic voting, if at all, college graduate that he could steal in a hurry, and resume his speech before I awoke. He went for the new CD player and, as he unplugged it, blew a fuse and the TV went black. He was now trapped and, huh? Oh, well, you see, I have special fuses which only blow out if too little electricity is being used at one time. Yeah. No. The power company installed them. I didn't have a choice. Well, it's a drag, actually. No. Yeah. Hey, remember that time you came over and tried to show me slides of your cousin's amputation and I couldn't hear what you were reading aloud from the surgical text because I had the dishwasher, washing machine, dryer, and blow dryer all going at once so I wouldn't blow a fuse? No? Me neither. Hey, can you hold on a minute? I think I have someone on the other line. All these things I spoke to you over the phone for 4 more hours until you spoke up, and with the abrupt inhalation preceding your initial phoneme, I could tell that you were somebody else, somebody with the wrong number, somebody I had confused with you. And what was worse was that the woman I thought was you actually had me confused with someone else she knew. And when I tried to convince her that she had me convinced with somebody who might have called her on purpose, she howled with laughter and said, "Steve, your exquisite humor has brought me back from the brink of suicide." "My name is Q!" She burst into laughter again. It was really awkward because by that time the MCI secret police had arrived and were rapping loudly on the door. Did their badges glint, or was that just me collapsing onto the piano keyboard? My phone bill wrote me an embittered letter that began, "I was payable in easy monthly installments, but you never bothered. Now they're coming to take you away, and I will be charged to someone else. May he strike a D minor or another related chord before they drag the maestro to their van." I wasn't sure if this was a good stopping place, so I called up my editor, Katie, and asked her how many lines and when we were going to press. She didn't tolerate wimpy writers, so I tried to make good copy. She smoked Brazilian cigars and only drank the best whiskey, some brand no bar ever had, so she dragged me to the most run-down places in town, ended up drinking orange juice instead and telling me about the Revolutionary Journal she used to run in Havana before she was forced to flee to America, clinging to the side of a nuclear submarine. Once, the editor of Newsweek had, foolishly, engaged her in a fist fight. That's a long story, though. I don't want to get into that. It's late. Aren't you sleepy yet? No? Okay. One more, but just one. But you always want me to tell the one about Katie and how she discovered a unified field theory called donut theory, whose announcement to the international scientific community was suppressed by the CIA when she was arrested and held without trial for... Okay, I'll tell it. Settle down. Well, it all started in 1818 when a female astronomer named... Skip to what part? The part where Katie staged an enormous protest at the Los Alamos site where the first atomic bomb blast took place later that same month, and how the protesters were all held custody as essentially political prisoners until after the bombing of... Not that part? Well, which part are you talking about? Porridge and bears? Grandmother eaten by a wolf? I think you're thinking of a different story. Woodsman? No, there's no woodsman to save her at the end of this one. In fact, at her trial, she defends herself and delivers a now historical soliloquy on the responsibility of the scientific... I thought she'd never fall asleep. Katie sets the briefcase containing all the money down on the kitchen counter and stares out over the spires and cupolas of the windy village, and the vocal timbres and the tiny speaker already reminded her of what he looked like the last time she shot him out of the pneumatic cannon, and he tore through the roof of the big top and never came down, as the audience jeered and threw peanut shells from the crowded risers. She had watched the ragged whole sky with a tear forming at the edge of her painted smile and honked once, sadly, in parting. The gears of the answering machine engaged, and the tape began to record. "Mrs. McDowell, this is William Gillespie calling from over here in accounts receivable. The other day we got a memo from you regarding stolen office supplies, and I just wanted to tell you that it was really incredible. The part about routine searches of employees' desks was really, really moving, especially the sentence that said, 'If these measures do not bring the situation under control, more serious penalties may be implemented.' That almost brought me to tears. I mean, your use of the word implemented, I think, rang so poetic and yet so true that all of us up here in accounts receivable just stood around the bulletin board saying nothing, holding hands. We were afraid to speak, and when we sat back at our desks, it seemed that time now moved sluggishly in the assimilation of every meaningful instant. Discreet and intractable. I guess I don't really know how to explain it in words. I just felt like a baby bird in the nest of the parent company and realized that the slightest breeze might send me tumbling, wet and ruffled, bare tail over underdeveloped wings, to the ground, to be almost certainly devoured by cats. Hello? You had picked up your phone, interrupting me in mid-sentence. Something in your tone of voice set me off, as if I had cooked you chicken and sausage jambalaya with a side of shrimp, only to find out you were a vegetarian. Or if I had spent 25 years designing a perpetual motion machine for your coffee table only to be told that solar power didn't count? As if I had spent months on a portrait of you only to discover that I had painted the Mona Lisa by accident instead? Yeah, I finally responded. Did you order a pizza? Yes. Okay, you said you wanted 12-inch? Yes. Okay, now is that radius or diameter? Circumference. Aha! In the background, you could hear the excitement among the cooks who had been arguing about this measurement for 15 minutes while all the other customers' pizzas burned joyously. There was the sound of measuring tape rattling back into its metal shell. There was loud quibbling about the value of pi, as 22/7 was not accurate enough for our chef. You hung up on this confusion and turned back to our chess game. I had all my pieces except for one pawn, and you had one pawn, but refused to give up. Your coach shouted encouragement in your ear, hammered your shoulders, and splashed water in your face. I sipped liquid protein from a squeeze bottle and tried to project all possible outcomes on a computer. Curiously, none of the possible outcomes involved a victory on my part. I called my lawyer on my cellular phone and exchanged hushed advice. The bell went off, and you came dancing out of your corner, bobbing and weaving. It was your turn, and you moved your pawn the final square to my edge of the board where it became queen. Check, you said. The crowd rose up shouting all around the Colosseum, holding up lighters. You plugged in your guitar and prepared to deliver your third encore. And through the haze, I saw that I could take your queen quite easily, but it was your only piece, and the balloons were starting to fall from the giant nets overhead as the audience carried you around the room, and famous celebrities prepared to open envelopes and read the winners' names, and the judges held up a roll of 9.9s. You did a triple somersault backflip and opened with a joke. It was too much for William. He let himself out through a side door and walked down the snowy street, kicking a pebble before him. This pebble snowballed until it was twice William's size, and with all his strength, he could only budge it inch by inch. Like that guy in that myth, you know the one. A personal message from William Gillespie Enterprises. We hope you enjoyed your copy of Letter to Katie. The questionnaire below will help us evaluate your response so that we might provide more trouble-free writing in the future. Merely check the response to the book, which most closely matches your own, and return the form to us along with the $10 evaluation processing fee. Cash is fine. 1. A real page-turner. 10 of them. Couldn't put it down. The table was wet. 2. This establishes Mr. Gillespie as one of the 10 greatest living authors living today who has written a letter to Katie of maybe 10 pages or more in 1993. 3. Like vintage Burroughs, Ginsberg, Acker with just a touch of Miller, Hemingway, Stein, and maybe a little Orwell, Dickens, Woolf. Whatever it is, I studied it in college. 4. This new voice of Illinois fiction is certainly spearheading the entire American movement, which is at the forefront of human civilization's advance into the 21st century, which proves, without a doubt, that Earth is breaking more new ground in storytelling than any of the other planets. 5. Like the Beatles on drugs. Like Joni Mitchell on seltzer water with lime. 6. Postmodern grunge cyberpunk. Just a reminder, there's lots of other letters to Katie available from William Gillespie Enterprises, as well as poems, prose, and novels, short stories. For a full color catalog of black and white manuscripts, send a self-addressed stamped envelope stuffed with $100 bills to our headquarters. In addition, the new spring line of William Gillespie outerwear is guaranteed to keep you cool when you can't take the heat and get out of the kitchen. Fabrics which stay soft when the going gets tough. In addition, William Gillespie t-shirts have always been a big seller, either sleeveless or not sleeveless. Be sure to specify number of arms when ordering. These great buys won't last long when they're the first to go, so go pick up your phone and ask for William Gillespie Enterprises. Soon to be announced, the William Gillespie Enterprises series of gender-biased toys to instill conformity at an early age. Nothing will make little Katie as susceptible to enslavement by domesticity as this toy ironing board, $999.99. Or how about making sure little Billy doesn't grow up to be an artist by giving him this baseball mitt, $999.99, all bearing the William Gillespie Enterprises logo, the WGIUPC barcode for $999.99. It is also worth mentioning that, for the more easily misled consumer, our corporate logo is available as a framed print ready for wall mounting in your living room, or get the forehead tattoo to project a more stylish image of yourself. Having our WGI UPC code on your head can make selling yourself or just showing what you're worth a whole lot more expedient. I'm having a heart attack. Get my attorney. I'm having a heart attack. I'm having a heart attack.
Q and Justice, that was unforgettable. But can we ask you a few questions?
Certainly.
Is it true that you're an insensitive poet?
Excuse me, I am Justice Interruptus. This is my client, Q Synopsis. And to ensure the legalistic validity of this interview, we have, I will be speaking for Q. We have some pre-recorded answers. Could you repeat the question, please?
Is it true that you're an insensitive poet?
My client has had his emotions surgically removed.
Really?
Yes.
Question 2.
Q. I find that our society's construct of time, the metaphor time is money, has numerous inconsistencies. I was wondering if you, as a Pulitzer runner-up, could offer us a new means of conceptualizing time.
Well, in every epoch, the ruling ideas are those of the ruling class. Those who own the means of material production also own the means of intellectual production.
Q baby, did you ever jot a sexy poem oozing a weak leech?
Well, a zebra ate a quick fax, waving pajama salad, ho!
That's almost too much for an older person to listen to. How about the Clintons' health care plan?
Well,
Is that the stupidest thing you ever heard, or what? Wouldn't you prefer a single-payer, global budgeting, and universal coverage?
Marx writes in the 18th Brumaire concerning J.F. Kennedy and Bill Clinton that of the recurring historical event, the first time is a tragedy, and the second time, a farce. Thank you very much.
Q, what is Herbert Brun's definition of fascism?
The system is more important than any of its elements.
Thank you for joining us on Works in Progress.